How Thiago Motta's 2-7-2 is breaking football. Bologna are set to make the Champions League for the first time in their history, despite having the 16th lowest wage budget in Serie A. To put that into context, only Luton Town in the Premier League have a lower budget than Bologna. The tactical side of their game is breaking football. Today on Tactics Explained, we're going to go through Bologna. We're going to talk about how Thiago Motta is using a libero and a lot of midfield rotation to basically break Serie A and Italian defences. Who'd have thought? Anyway, let's get this party started. Thiago Motta is breaking football with his interpretation of tactics, setting Bologna up in a 2-7-2. For you and I, we'd usually view this system as a 4-3-3. 4 at the back, 1 defensive midfielder, supported by 2 central midfielders, and then a wide front 3, including 2 wingers and a central striker. But Motta is viewing the game completely differently. Instead of looking at it in this horizontal plane, 4 at the back, 3 in midfield and 3 up front, he's viewing it from a vertical perspective. In 2018, he said, "The future lies with a 2-7-2. I count 7 in the middle of the field. For me, the attacker is the first defender and the goalkeeper is the first striker. The goalkeeper starts the game with his feet, and from the wings, the offensive pressing to recover the ball takes place." So in terms of interpretation of the 2-7-2 that Thiago Motta is using to break Italian football, it comes from that vertical plane, in a sense of the fullback and the wingers take up 2 units, and then we have a middle 7 that controls the play and looks to circulate the ball through progression and patience. The big part of Thiago Motta's shape and system and structure, it's based on relationalism. More on that later on, but in simple terms, this block of 7 is used on either flank to really overload the opponent in terms of numbers. We frequently see the midfielders and the striker and the 2 centre-backs getting involved in the possession play, which means the opposition don't have enough bodies to deal with it. The nominal wide player is the only player that will be away from the ball, holding the width, looking for opportunities to get 1v1s or switches of play, to creating shooting opportunities. What you tend to expect from a 4-3-3 and build-up is one of the midfielders dropping or a fullback moving into midfield. So in a sense, you could have the right back moving into central midfield, even the left back, sort of like Ange Postecoglou's Spurs. Or alternatively, you have one of the central midfielders dropping deep to become a double pivot and getting on the ball, allowing your team to still have 4 attacking players with a base of 4 and a double pivot to play through. Bologna are breaking football with their build-up. They're using a libero. Before we dive into the overall tactical Bologna concept, let's dive into what is a libero. Franz Beckenbauer was the libero. Beckenbauer would cover the space in behind the defence when his team didn't have the ball. But in possession, Beckenbauer's role as a libero would see him join the midfield and play make from deep. The libero has largely fallen out of the modern game, with duties split between sweeper keepers, who cover the space in behind the defence, and deep line playmakers, who will drop in to collect the ball off the centre-backs and orchestrate attacks from there. However, Pep Guardiola started to modernise the libero, using John Stones to advance into midfield alongside Rodri, whilst 2 inverted fullbacks create a back 3 in possession. At times, this role sees Stones take up more advanced positions than Rodri, as the England international looks to operate as a passing option in between the lines. We've seen Simeone Inzaghi use one of his centre-backs in midfield and build-up in Serie A, but we've not seen a true libero for over a decade. Thiago Motta is doing it at Bologna. What this means is that one of Beckham or Calafiori will join Freuler in defensive midfield or create a back 3 in possession and allow them to have a really dominant diamond or square or box in midfield. This use of the centre-back is really interesting, where John Stones is fixed and he'll be the player that always move into that midfield area. At Bologna, they take it in turns. They read the tactical situation, and then a player will move into that zone. The really interesting side as well is the interpretation of each centre-back in terms of what the role is like. Beckhama's more of a player that will hold and play passes, whereas Calafiori will really get himself into the final third, more of a number 8 than a number 6. But this creates a super fluid 3-2-2-3 structure for Bologna, and it's very difficult to deal with, as that compact nature of midfield allows them to overload most midfield structures with movement. And that's a really, really key part about Bologna. They're so fluid in that midfield area that when you're picking up one man or you're playing a man-marking system or even a zonal system, how do you pick up the structure? Because it's constantly moving and it's constantly overloading a flank. So why does Thiago Motta use a libero in possession? The first thing we've got to look at is manipulating that first line of pressure. Using the goalkeeper in build-up as arguably another centre-back opens up a lot of passing options, but also overloads the opponent in the defensive sense if they're playing with one striker. This allows Bologna to complete that first pass into midfield. That's where the danger really starts for the opponents, because number one, they've manipulated the first line of pressure, and now with that roaming playmaker or libero, they've manipulated that second line of pressure that will either come from one number 10 or two central midfielders. This creates a lot of problems for the opposition. Number one, it creates disorganisation in the opposition. Number two, players that are playing against Bologna really underrate the centre-back stepping into midfield. Calafiori is one of those players that picks up some really nice pockets of space in attacking midfield. We'll see later on a goal where Calafiori's actually picked up the ball in the inside left position, which is pretty incredible for a centre-back. And lastly, who picks up that extra player? Do you jump on with the number 8, pressing higher up the pitch, moving a centre-back into that midfield zone, creating further disorganisation, potentially for runs from the kind of outside in from a winger, or alternatively, Joshua Zirkzee hitting the channels, who does it very, very well. But more importantly, it creates a situation in midfield, if you're going to sit off and stand off with your traditional back four, that you're going to be able to be patient and create an opportunity to play through the lines with rotation, be it the likes of Ferguson dropping off into the nominal wide area to pick up the ball, Calafiori spinning in behind, and creating that kind of diagonal pass to really break the lines. And having that spare man available for the diagonal pass not only makes progression a lot easier, but it puts Bologna into dangerous positions when they've played those passes to really attack the opposition's back line, to create opportunities and create situations where they're overloading the opposition in an attacking sense. Usually this occurs after a number of passes in sustained pressure, where there'll be a key event that will trigger the movement for the centre-back to step into midfield. The first one being a centre-back themselves carrying into midfield and then playing a backwards pass and then retaining that position in central midfield. Alternatively, what we'll see is a fullback triggering it. That is if Bologna, again, are playing the ball around, they've got some possession. Let's say the left back, Christensen, has the ball. It'll be triggered on him cutting inside. What we'll usually see is the far side centre-back, in this example, Bakima, moving into midfield and creating that base. A back three to a midfield, and then, of course, that front five. This created by that fullback driving inside, and then the central midfielder moving high. Alternatively, we do see it when the ball's with the goalkeeper, or it's in a dead ball situation of just one of the centre-backs stepping up when the play is dead, moving into that midfield line, and then playing the next few phases in that position. Alternatively, if the ball has just been won in a pressing situation, let's say Calafiori, who likes to jump quite high and press the oppositions, either number 10 or number 9 dropping off the line. If Bologna win the ball in that central area and Calafiori's already in that position, they'll just maintain that shape, and he'll be involved in the ball progression and, of course, moving it to getting it closer to goal for Bologna to score. This creates a lot of problems for the opposition. It's really interesting, those little tweaks and triggers that allow Bologna to move into this shape. A centre-back driving into midfield, a full-back cutting inside, a pressing moment and then retaining that position, or alternatively, when the ball is dead and just naturally moving into that area. There's also other instances of Bologna naturally creating the 3-2 structure, such as a midfielder dropping deep and a centre-back moving high, or alternatively, one of the full-backs just narrowing and inverting and creating that shape. But the big part of Bologna's success when playing out from the back and driving through midfield from centre-back is it creates a lot of problems for the opposition. The progression is more dangerous. What it allows Bologna to do is drive through the thirds. So if one of the centre-backs steps out and moves into that midfield line, they can get Bologna up the pitch. So starting off in their defensive third with the right carry at the right time, they can move into the final third in their really good possession shape. As soon as they get into the final third, the centre-back might play backwards or to the side, retain possession, then take that position. That's why it's so difficult to deal with, because naturally in that deeper position, you've probably got, one striker or an attacking midfielder that's got to deal with that. And usually there's moments where Bologna have overloaded the opponents, they carry through, they drive through, and there's big problems. The proficiency of Bologna's defenders at ball carrying is highlighted by the stats, with 3 of Bologna's centre-backs ranking in the top 7 of centre-backs for progressive carry distance this season. This gives Bologna an advantage as their possession game is no longer deep in their own half, but it's in the final third with all the superiority and advantages of the shape and system. One of the big things that I like about Bologna is they've got different centre-backs that provide different types of play in this role. We mentioned Calafiori and his ability to drive and to carry and move off the ball is really good. Bekema is more of a passing libero. He's going to get on the ball and he's going to play those passes a little bit more direct. But also Bologna have a bit of strength in depth. For example, if Bekema maybe playing right back or on the bench, LAKEY can come in, and he's a player that's really interesting. He's different to Calafiori in a sense of if we looked at him in that kind of advanced position in central midfield, instead of looking at someone that's going to move off the ball and someone that's going to drive through and carry, you've now got a player that's really good at retaining possession. A player that not only makes good decisions, but also is really good in counter-pressing situations, using his height and his strength and his ability to win the ball back in those central midfield areas. But also the simplicity in his passing allows for the natural overload, as we can see right now on the left-hand side of Bologna's shape, to open up the switch of play, to allow someone like Orsolini to have a 1v1 as he likes to do and get shots at goal. Recently in a press conference, Thiago Motta actually went into the difference of his centre-backs, giving his team different strengths.
Non è la concorrenza John e Riccardo, è un ragazzo molto tecnico, è un ragazzo che sulla uscita da dietro vede dei passaggi importanti dove può dare una soluzione e una costruzione contro le squadre che vengono a pressare. Riccardo ce l'ha in un modo diverso, ce l'ha portando palla, ce l'ha con inserimenti senza palla anche.
This sounds a lot like how Pep Guardiola talks about his Manchester City players that can provide different tactical roles within his shape and system. Okay, we've talked tactics. It is now time to dive into a few examples. First up, we've got Calafiori as a libero versus Lecce. So we pick up the play with Lewis Ferguson after he's just received a switch from the goalkeeper. As I mentioned previously, there's a lot of flexibility and fluidity in how Bologna play out from the back. A shuttler has dropped into a full-back position, has become the nominal left-back. What we saw previously was a trigger of a libero moving into midfield, was a fullback cutting inside. We see Ferguson cut inside, which triggers the movement of Calafiori. This causes a lot of problem. As we mentioned, defenders into midfield are less likely to be tracked because the opposition undervalue what they can bring, which is a big problem for Lecce's attacking midfielder in this situation. Calafiori is simply going to move into a massive area of space. Bologna are going to recycle the ball back through Christensen, the left back who's going to clip a pass. At this moment, we can see the two centre-backs. One of them's deep in that back line. The goalkeeper's arguably playing as the other centre-back, and Calafiori's into midfield in a lot of space. One clip ball takes out 5 Lecce defenders, allowing Calafiori to receive the ball with a 5-on-4 situation. He carries, as we mentioned before, a good skill of his, waits for the right moment, and then splits the opposition. In terms of the kind of natural side of Bologna, we'll speak about a little bit later on, but that kind of overload, underload concept, switching the ball to a winger with a 1v1 is a key concept of them scoring goals. This is a brilliant bit of play from Calafiori, and Orsolini, with a simple finish, opens his body up, puts the ball in the back of the net. But the use of a libero to move into midfield, act as an off-the-ball runner, then carry through, is the reason why they score this goal against Lecce. One of my favourites of this season. Moving forward, as we mentioned, Bologna play different players in these areas. LAKEY's that kind of retention player, Calafiori's that off-the-ball runner, carrier, and then, of course, my favourite, Bekema, a player that's got a great passing range. And this is a moment in the game against Torino that wins the game for Bologna. Again, we pick up the play with Bologna just recycling possession. At this point, they're going to move into their shape. As you can already see, number 31, bottom of shot, Bekema, is already in an advanced area. So simply, he's going to stay there. He's not going to drop back into the defensive line. He's going to pick up that defensive midfield position. Again, we can see the good build-up from Bologna. They're back 3. They're 2 defensive midfielders. And of course, Lewis Ferguson's just dropped in. He does that a lot. He is a bit of a shuttler for them in a possession sense. Instead of moving the vertical lines like a box-to-box midfielder, he operates horizontally, where he'll pick up the ball in the left-back position, position, the right back position is very, very fluid, which creates, issues for the opponents in terms of picking him up. But as Calafiori kind of drives through, we see Bekema again attack the space. A key concept of Thiago Motta's team is finding the space. They're very patient on the ball. They don't pass forward for the sake of passing forward and being vertical. They wait for the right moment when players are in space to play that diagonal pass, as Calafiori, who's playing left back in this game, splits the opposition, and Bekema is clean through in midfield. Then finds a through ball to Fabian in behind the defence. A little bit lucky ricochet off the goalkeeper, but slotted into the back of the net. But that ability to play in different liberos based on different skill sets in the same games, in a sense of one can drop, one can go high based on what is the tactical situation, is incredibly powerful. And that is why Bologna are breaking football with liberos. So we've had a little bit of a chat about liberos breaking the opposition's shape and structure. Now let's talk about midfield, because Thiago Motta's setup is breaking Serie A defences. Rotations, overloads, switches of play, all really good landmarks of a good possession side. Looking at Thiago Motta's thesis, he talks about two managers, Gasperini and of course Marcelo Bielsa. And he says his tactics are influenced by those two guys. So when you look at Bologna, we mentioned before, the libero moving into midfield to create another body, but also they attack flank to flank, in a sense of they'll move basically their entire shape and structure over to one side of the pitch to overload that area. That includes the far side fullback, that includes all the midfield and the striker. They're really trying to overload the opposition with sheer numbers, and they can use those little boxes, the diamonds, the triangles to play through pressure and create that way. But what this means as well is that you've got the switch on to the far side winger. So if you tap down the left, Orsolini is always going to be available on the right to cut inside and shoot, creating a 1v1, a great method of chance creation. But actually, if we look at Gasperini's Atalanta, there's a lot of similarities in terms of style and what they do with Thiago Motta's Bologna. Gasperini's Atalanta are one of my favourite teams in European football through the ages. We've gone back a few years and we've picked probably my favourite side, which contains Freuler, who now plays for Bologna. But in terms of the overall structure and style, it's a little bit different than what you'd expect from a Pep Guardiola or a positional game. Gasperini's Atalanta were very, very keen on creating these wide diamonds, with the outside centre-back, the central midfielder, the wing-back, and then one of the forwards moving over to create a diamond. But what they tend to do was overload certain areas of the pitch and have that same method of creating chances and opportunities from having sheer bodies to play through the opponent's lines. This allowed Atalanta to attack down one flank and kill you on the other side. Ilicic was really good at waiting for the right time and then creating a little shooting opportunity for himself to give Atalanta goals. But that idea of overloading certain areas in a relationalist way, we see that with Bologna. Obviously, we made a video recently about Fernando Diniz's Fluminense, a South American team that's using relationalism. Gasperini's Atalanta is the same, and now Thiago Motta's Bologna are doing really, really similar concepts, where they're overloading certain areas of the pitch with so many bodies to allow that ball retention and speed of pass and ability to move away from each other is so, so good, which allows them to be a good footballing side. But there's a lot that Gasperini has taught Thiago Motta. And we see the creation of wide diamonds or wide overloads in Thiago Motta's Bologna, where they attack flank to flank. In a sense, Christensen, the normal left back in this move, will be joined by a support player in, of course, Freuler. Sally Makers will hold the width. Ferguson may move over as being a forward pass option. You could even have Xerxes dropping in, which creates this really difficult shape to pick up. In a sense of you creating a bit of a pentagon, which creates so many different passing options and angles. You've got support players, you've got the vertical pass into feet, which can move to layoffs, and the up-back through methodology that we see time and time again with good footballing teams is very, very frequent with Bologna. But the overall style is relationalism. But what actually is relationalism? European football has become well accustomed to the idea of a highly organised and structured positional play, with the likes of Pep Guardiola's tiki-taka based approach seen as the preferred method of possession-based teams. In most possession-based systems that follow the positional approach, players operate in a structure with predetermined space or zones on the pitch. Players in these systems tend to hold their positions in their respective zones with the ball being brought to them. Meanwhile, a relationist approach sees players move towards towards the ball, create and exploit space through their actions. This approach will see an initial structure, but there's a lot more freedom to roam in order to create overloads around the ball. Unlike the control and deliberate positional play, space in a relationalist team is a lot more varied and is dependent on the pitch or game state. Relationism is starting to build a bit of momentum in Europe, and Thiago Motta's Bologna are a team that really plays with a lot of the concepts. From a really basic level, I think the midfield is an interesting space to talk about right now. Bologna are breaking the opposition's defensive structure by the rotation and interchange in midfield. What you'd expect from a positional team is one of the midfielders to operate inside left and one of them to operate inside right. Relational teams are a little bit different, and Bologna do it really, really well. What that is there's a lot of vertical and horizontal movement, but the three midfielders usually move in unison. They usually get around the ball area to become options into feet or to progress the play with an up-back through methodology, as we mentioned before. But I think the interesting side versus maybe other teams in Europe, utilising the up-back through methodology, is the movement of players. That they are capable and very happy to move the ball back down the back four to the goalkeeper if the players aren't in space, if they're not getting picked up, or if they're in a bad option for a pass. So what that tends to happen when they're moving the ball and they're retaining it around the back line is we see a lot of movement. At times, Freuler will drop a little 1-2 with maybe the centre-back and then move forward, which is quite unnatural of a usual number 6. But Freuler will make moves into midfield and behind the opponent's back line after playing a passing combination. What that move would see, Freuler would make that forward motion to attack in midfield. Ferguson might drop. The other central midfielder might drop as well, but there's always that movement in unison. We also throw in the other concept we mentioned previously of having a centre-back or roaming centre-back in midfield or a libero. That adds up even more fluidity in that zone. When the opponents are really dealing with the interchanging positions of Bologna's central midfielders, you throw in that defender as well, it's very, very difficult. There's a lot of rotation between the midfield as the ball is getting circulated around the back line, which opens up the pass at the right time. And Calafiori is probably the best player from the Bologna backline in terms of playing those diagonals and those reverses in between the lines, and it allows Bologna to get into the final third. Relationalism is breaking modern European defences that are used to coping with positional play. Thiago Motta's Bologna, Gasparini's Atalanta, and even Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds United use relationalism to create chances and open their opponents up. The big thing with these three sides is they've massively punched above their weight by using these approaches. Gasparini took Atalanta to the Champions League for the first time in their history. Leeds United under Bielsa finished 9th in the Premier League, despite having a team built of championship players. And of course, Bologna under Motta are set to go to Europeans' premier competition, the Champions League. When you put it all together like Bologna have, the result is a team that punches massively above their weight. And we've not even spoke about the defensive side of their game, which is absolutely brilliant. Their 4-3-2-1 is influenced by Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool and Germany in the 2014 World Cup, pressing centrally from midfield, squeezing the opponent and using a gegenpressing style to counter-attack. The effectiveness of Bologna is highlighted by the stats, with Bologna ranking 3rd in Serie A for PPDA, 2nd for challenge intensity, and 1st for possession-adjusted tackles per 90. Prior to his appointment, Bologna were averaging just 1 point per game. That is nearly doubled under Thiago Motta. Bologna have a rich history, having won the Scudetto on numerous occasions, but this could be the first time that they'll ever finish in the Champions League places in Serie A. But moving forward, Thiago Motta is the guy. He is the next hot topic in European football, combining relationalism with a few positional play ideas. Bologna look like a serious side. Anyone that's going to gamble and take Thiago Motta next up is going to get one of the hottest properties on the European coaching circuit. We're talking Liverpool, Manchester United, Bayern Munich. All of these clubs should be looking at Thiago Motta. But anyway, guys, what have you made of Thiago Motta's Bologna? Get into the comments below. Have you been impressed with Calafiori playing as a libero? Is it that midfield rotation, Lewis Ferguson? Or is it off Joshua Zirkzee up front, scoring the goals and receiving a lot of passes into feet? I've been Statman Dave. Subscribe if you're new. We'll see you later.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, why not check out some more content on the Statman Dave YouTube channel?